Oh, welcome back to Lucore Automotive Services. It snowed like 4 inches last night. So luckily I moved this truck into the bay yesterday during the day before the snow came. And so I'm going to spend the day inside the shop working on pulling the engine out of this. We had this thing in a little while ago. We looked it over. It cranks really slow. It does not sound healthy. And we've opted to just pull the engine, do a full teardown on it. This is a 6-liter diesel. Sometimes I will decab these. In this case, because it's a long-term project for the customer, he's not in any rush for this. And we're actually just going to build the engine, probably build his engine, as opposed to pulling it out and putting in a running complete. Because we're doing the engine build, we're just going to pull the engine out of it. That way we can move the truck outside, and that allows us to use the bay space while the engine's out of the vehicle, instead of tying up the bay for, you know, Lord only knows how long. Because with, you know, machining and parts and whatnot, you never know how long it's going to take to build an engine. So at any rate, I'm going to get this engine yanked out of here. I got quite a bit of stuff to get pulled. It's about 10:30 a.m. on a Saturday, and hopefully I'll have this out before I leave today. Hopefully. It'll all depend on my knee and my motivation. So this truck has 200 and some odd thousand miles on it. It's not too crusty. It is going to need some rocker repairs. But if you look up in here, you can see everything's covered in black soot, which tells me there's been an exhaust leak for some time. It's got a little bit of an oil leak. More than likely the separator that the oil pan mounts to is probably, the seals on it are dried up, considering this is, you know, a 20-year-old truck. That's why we're pulling the engine, to do a complete reseal on it, as well as repair anything that we deem necessary. So I'm going to pull the lower exhaust manifold bolts. I'm going to pull all the bell bolts, pull the torque converter bolts, pull the engine mount bolts. And at that point, I am pretty much done underneath the vehicle. Then I'll move on to removing the radiator, the fan shroud, and the charge air cooler and upper core support bar. And that's all I really need to pull off to get this thing out of here. We'll drop the power steering off to the side, and, you know, whatever else we have to disconnect. There's quite a bit to it. Basically, I will be stripping the intake manifold, so the turbo, the intake, the up pipes I leave in the chassis so that I can get the engine up and out, and the cooler I can leave in there. And then I have a fixture that I bolt to where the turbo pedestal sits, and it allows me to pick the engine up and out of the chassis without completely pulling the nose off of the vehicle. I've done it a few times. It takes a bit of time. I like decabbing these vehicles. They're designed to pull the cabs off just like any vehicle that goes down an assembly line. But sometimes decabbing is just not the answer. If I was putting a running complete from Ford in, I'm not going to disassemble a factory assembled engine to get it to fit in between the fenders when I can just decab it. So, all right, let me get at it. I got a lot to do. Get my tools situated and organized. You can't see anything. It's dark. Let there be light. Those are so handy. I love those things. I think I'm only missing one of the 6 that I've originally bought. One's in pieces and it still works. It's pretty impressive. Look out below! Oh my goodness. Okay, now. One hiding right there, as I recall. Yep. That's the one Junior broke on my other one that I had him take apart. when your transmission isn't coming out, when you're prying on it with a pry bar, it's probably because you forgot to take out a bolt. Just saying. Oh my lord. Oh. You need a little lubrication there, fella. Or you're gonna gall all the way through. And you probably galled all the way through anyway. Ah, looking all right. Good thing I put some oil on it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Ooh. There's one there. 7, 8, 9. There are 2 on the top of this one too. I think it's. Let's see if I can get to this guy up top. Yeah. He's way up there. Don't you strip on me. Oh, you. I'm not cooperating. Trick got the other one off. Oh, there's the brake loose. Oh, I'm gonna look like a coal miner by the time I'm done working on this truck. It's black up there. Aha! I win! Fries are done. So, when you ask a professional how they get the top bell bolts out of a truck, it's with a 3-foot long extension and an impact, and sometimes a wrench. So all my bell bolts are out now. My engine mount bolts are off. I did notice that we're going to need to put transmission cooler lines on this. So as I have the engine out of this, it's going to be really easy to change some of these additional parts. Not really much additional labor because I'm already in here. But you see how this crimp has split from corrosion. The salt gets down in there and it makes it split. It swells and splits and just destroys these things. So it's going to need new transmission cooler lines, because you don't want to do all this work to an engine and then blow the transmission up because you slacked off on a couple $100 worth of cooler lines. My cooler is up front. Like that's power steering cooler. Condenser looks pretty good from what I can see of it. And the trans cooler is not rotten, so that's pretty good. I'm probably going to put a radiator in this just because the plastic tanks rupture from time to time, and this one's 20 years old or thereabouts. And as I'm looking over things, well, that's something. Somebody decided to use the use MIG wire to hold that end cap in. Oh, they did that one too. That's weird. Alright, well, we'll be getting a shaft for it because that's no good. Shock bushings are rotten, which means they're probably at least 10 years old. Ball joints are done. Some more lockout's been done. Looks like we'll be resurfacing the rotors. Got an upgraded front sway bar on it. What's dripping? Oh, that was me. That was me putting ATF on the bolts. Yeah, let's move on to the next step. Torque converter bolts. I decided to drop it down and get some of the stuff off the front, which will make it easier for me to pull my bell bolts. Pretty straightforward. I'm just going to start ripping stuff out of here because a lot of it's got to come out. So I keep this is the correct hose clamp that's on this thing. On the bottom, somebody took off the spring clamp and put 2 worm clamps on it. And on plastic tanks, it really needs to have these expanding clamps. This one has a spring load into it, and then the other ones are like just a spring loaded clamp. And it's very important to use that style of clamp on plastic tanks, because what happens is the worm clamps that you tighten down, it ends up pinching off the plastic, and then the plastic breaks internally, and that causes headaches. Looks like somebody cut this radiator shroud. I don't normally do that. It's easy enough to pull the shroud out in one piece, but somebody's already cut this one. It is easier to get it out when it's cut. Oh, that's not a good sign. It's going to need a fan clutch. So I'm going to take off my fan clutch and my stator. Contrary to popular belief, removing this stator is a bad idea. You will not have as good a cooling with that thing removed. I see a lot of trucks come in without those, and it is not good. I'll go ahead and pull off my boost tubes. This must be an early 03. It has the metal tubes. A bit of oil, not too bad. Somebody made it hard on me. One of the big problems with 6-liter diesels is they're grossly misunderstood. They have their problems, but a lot of their problems can be overcome. There we go. You can see I used the tool. Somebody did not use the tool. See, somebody used an impact with a pin on it. That's what trapped my tool. I'll have to knock that off of there. It's got a couple chips on the blades too, which will make it out of balance and take the water pump out pretty quickly. Also looks like it's got a bundle of quick connects in there. So this fan shroud, this fan, busted there, busted there, busted there. So this fan clutch and fan are both garbage. You can find probably a used source for those, hopefully. Stator's in good shape other than the fact that it's missing a bunch of bolts. Oh, that one's broke. Somebody must not have known that that was there. Because the bolt's not there, neither is the piece. I have seen a lot of guys convert these over to electric cooling fans, and if they're doing any sort of towing, they end up putting the factory fan back on. The electric fans, when these trucks are towing, do not move enough air to cool this engine. Alright, so I'm down to the serpentine belt, which is way easier to change than a lot of people believe. I mean, you do have to snake it through and around and back and forth and up and over. But it's literally this easy to loosen the belt. That's it. That's all you got to do. Give it a tug and push the little tab on the tensioner down, and it locks it into place. Now when you're done, you make sure it's in place and release it and retension your belt. Same thing if you're doing an alternator. So now you can just set this off, remove your alternator. I usually put a strap on this, keep tension on it. But it's that easy to change a belt. This does need a belt. Next step, I'm going to pull the turbo, and now that I have access to the front harmonic balancer bolts, which helps me rotate the engine over to pull my torque converter bolts, I'll get my torque converter bolts pulled. Once the turbo's out, I'm going to actually leave the intake manifold on this one, so I want to see if I can get the engine out with the intake manifold on. I've always put them in from the top with the intake off, and I put the intake on in the truck. But I want to see if I can leave the intake manifold on. I think I will be able to. I think there's enough room. So that's exciting. That's a little less work over the fender that needs to be done. We are going to replace all the heater hoses on this. These have phenolic Ys in them, and those phenolic Ys fail. I had that happen to mine right after I got done putting an engine back in my my 03, the big black Excursion. And then I had the overwhelming regret of thinking to myself, boy, I wish I'd have put those in when I had the engine out. It would have been a lot easier. Live and learn, I guess. The heater hose hooks in over there. So take the hose off from behind the balancer or the idler pulley. Might as well pull my alternator. Fork. That was nice. Right in the drink. Well, at least it's well lubricated now. Normally it drops right on that pin and breaks it off. We'll clean that up. I probably have 5 or 6 extras of those. Stupid gravity. Alright, so the alternator's out of the way now. This actuator is not used. The programming for it has been just to make it sit idle, so a lot of times I'll update the inlet horn to the 05 style. That metal tube is supposed to be embedded in this, because that's what supports the plastic to keep the plastic from crumbling. We may end up getting a new tank for this one. This one's pretty stained and pretty gross. How you doing, Mr. Fickham? We'll go ahead and get you pulled out of there. It has a blue sticker 04 valve cover on it. Of course, that doesn't mean the engine hasn't been changed. The old valve cover wasn't put back on it, but it looks to be pretty original. The guy that owns it doesn't have any knowledge of an engine being changed in it. It has the later updated Fickum mounts instead of the cast aluminum ones that vibrate the Fickums to death. Look at all that soot down in there. Woo. Our engine harness connects into the engine control module. There. And it hooks into the body harness. Don't forget to hook those up when you go back together. I feel for you guys doing this out in your own garages. You DIY guys. I'm spoiled. I like having my equipment. Oh. That clamp was loose. I'm going to say this is where our exhaust leak was. There's definitely some soot in there, so let's say that's probably our culprit. Alright, I'd like to have this turbo out of here before I take a break, because then it's evac the AC, pop my... I decided I'm actually going to leave my power steering pump connected. I'm just going to disconnect my power steering pressure line and my suction line and pull the power steering pump out with the engine. And I'm going to do the same with the AC compressor. I'm just going to pull the high side and low side lines off of their connections, basically off of the dryer and the condenser, and I'll pull it out with the engine, and then I'll just take those parts off outside the engine, because it's a lot easier to service those out of the vehicle. That's a common problem that causes a low power problem. We'll talk about that when we go back together. Amazing how many little things can cause big problems on this engine. It's a very high-tech, very finicky power plant, but when they are running right, man, do they run well. I have a 6-liter in my 2005, the white flatbed that runs all over the country grabbing stuff. It's got 420,000 miles on it, and I don't think that engine's ever been apart. I do need to pull it because it's leaking oil, but the thing runs amazing. So maybe that'll be the next 6-liter I work on. I'll be pulling the engine out of my service truck and resealing it. It's still factory head studs. It's got a bulletproof diesel EGR cooler in it. The remote oil cooler, which really drops your oil temps. Oil lasts a lot longer. Oh, it didn't go in the drink. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Should probably move that bucket. I don't think I have anything else that's going to be leaking all over the place down here. Turbos on these are pretty easy to change. It's 3 bolts in the base, 2 bolts for the oil feed, 2 V-band clamps. You can get them out with the alternator still in, but I always pull the alternator out of the way. Just makes it easier. I save some of these old meat grinder swivel sockets for getting into tight spots. This driver's side front turbo bolt is one of those. Oh. speed wrench. Alright, so with that I should be able to pull my turbo out. Alright, turbo time. Whew! Making me work today. Somebody did an EGR delete. Fix that. Let's pull our torque converter bolts and our up pipe bolts. Come on, Sally. Let's go. There we go. That's the old style turbo drain tube. We'll update that. Turbo pedestal is out of the way, which should allow me to put my lifting fixture on there. Now it's time to pull my bell bolts, disconnect a couple more things, and then we're pretty close to getting this thing out of here. There's a few different ways to get your, not bell bolts, torque converter bolts out. There's a window on the driver's side just above the oil pan, and conveniently when you have the stator and the fan and the radiator out of the way, you can get it with a long extension right down the center, and you can just rotate the engine over with the crank and zip out your bits. So that's what I'm in the process of doing right now. So we'll get that done. It's kind of part of the tedious part of doing this job. It gets old. Alright, bells. Oh, hey, there's my wrenches. Right where I left it. Found it. Alright, torque converter bolts are loose. Motor mount bolts are loose. AC lines, power steering hoses. Well, tomorrow's the 4-week anniversary of my knee surgery. That's exciting. Probably not for you guys, but it's exciting for me because I'm getting around pretty good, all things considered. Still in a pretty good amount of pain, but it is what it is. It's always worse before it gets better. The rest of the stuff I'm gonna have to do from up top. Pressure check that guy. Transmission oil cooler, massive. Alright. So my up pipes are loose. I ran into a problem with my transmission cooler lines. There's a nut on the passenger side that holds a bracket that holds the cooler lines against the engine, and when I pulled that nut out, it pulled the stud out. So the cooler lines are locked to the electrical harness that runs back to the starter. So I'm just going to cut the transcooler lines off. I've got a new set already ordered. I knew that we needed those earlier, as I showed you the crimp connections were split from corrosion and swelling. So I'm going to cut those real quick, and then it's time to get the hoist in here and pop this engine out of here and move this truck outside, and then I can start disassembling this engine. So exciting stuff moving forward. Just go right through the rubber there. Oh, crikey. Harbor Freight bolt cutters don't work real great once they get stretched out a little bit. Maybe I can grind that out a little bit and make it work better. Let's try that. Oh wait, you can adjust it there. Hey, just make the adjustment, dummy. Close the gap. Maybe they'll cut now. Nope, they still stink. Oh. Had these pliers for like 30 years. Never replaced them once. They still cut. Still can't see through them. Good tools are worth every penny. Can't even see the etching on this one. Pretty sure they're snappers. Ooh, can't see anything. I'm bleeding. Bleeding the old ATF. Well, there she is in all her glory. She is out and ready to be stripped down to bare block. Pretty uneventful process, other than my tow truck giving up the ghost on my boom. But at least it's out and I can do service to it on the stand. So next step is put it on the stand, strip her down, start cleaning parts, taking some measurements, and then it will be time to reassemble this engine. That will be in another video. Thanks for coming along for the ride on 6-liter diesel engine removal without removing the cab. Makes it easy for me to get the vehicle out of the service bay and free up the service bay to do other things so that I can keep moving forward with other projects. At any rate, thanks for watching. Click like, subscribe, leave us a comment below. Have a safe day out there, and we'll see you soon.